We all know what it means when someone says, I got triggered. It feels like I got triggered. It's a comment, a look, a memory. And suddenly, you can spiral. What if, though, we could flip that so you could create positive triggers, where you could trigger success, a subconscious success trigger? So what if you could train your mind to trigger success instead of self-sabotage? What would that give for you, and what would that allow you to do? So on this episode of the Hyper Growth Zone podcast, we're going to go into that and set up your mind to be the subconscious success trigger. So it's important to understand that technically all triggers aren't bad. They're really automatic associations that the mind has learned, and you can actually rewire them. Imagine that. So by the end of this episode, I think you'll have a good grasp, a good feel. You'll start seeing yourself, knowing that when you hear a trigger, that this will remind you to create different triggers, success triggers, empowering triggers, resourceful triggers, and positive triggers. So a trigger really is a stimulus that activates an emotional or physiological response tied to some sort of past experience. So once this stimulus gets fired off, so this could be you seeing something, it could be you hearing a certain sound, it could be you feeling something, or even smelling something, or tasting something. For example, let me give you some positive triggers already. What if you smell a certain food that your mom makes or your grandma makes? Doesn't that bring up a really good feeling in you? So this shows you that triggers are already really, really successful for you. However, when someone thinks of the word trigger, they think of it as something negative. I got triggered, you got triggered, he got triggered, she got triggered. So this means that the mind, it wires through this association, this stimulus, and this response. So that creates an association in your mind, and your mind starts to think, okay, with some sort of repetition and the emotion involved in this trigger, then that becomes a habit. So some other common examples, let's say there's some sort of criticism, and that triggers some bad feelings in someone, for example. So that can be an example of a trigger. Another one is a deadline. Maybe every time there's a deadline, it creates anxiety in certain people. And this leads to a behavior such as procrastination, for example. Or let's say that someone's getting praised all the time, and they actually think that is pressure. So they're trying to be perfect all the time. So it really depends on how you think of these different triggers. So criticism, deadlines, praise, these could all lead to a certain habit. So like I said, procrastinating or thinking you have to do everything perfect. So triggers, these aren't enemies. No, they certainly aren't. What are they? They're a way for you to learn and for you to create new pathways in your mind. So what if every time something happened, you could stop for a second and think, how do I want to react? You could have the ability to create a new subconscious success trigger with anything that gave you any sort of negative feeling. I'm sure that would be helpful, wouldn't it? So triggers can be your friend. Triggers can lead to success. Triggers can help you create your ideal future. And triggers, they can create predictable results. Because what if you could set up triggers in your environment, around your house, in your bedroom, in your office, at work, with certain people? And what if that triggered a good feeling in you and in others? So this is what we're really thinking about here. So part of this is self-reflecting. You want to self-reflect and figure out, what are your negative triggers? What are things that are happening that are leading to a habit or behavior that you do not want. So this is your time to self-reflect, and I'm going to ask some different questions here. So just begin to think, what is it that you have a negative trigger about? Something you see, hear, feel, taste, smell. So what situations or what comments do people make, for example, that instantly change your mood? What if something happens and you automatically lose momentum or confidence? Maybe something like this happens. And that's totally fine if it does, because you're going to learn from this and you're going to want to do something else instead. And then you can also think to really identify how you feel and why this is not beneficial for you and really change the behavior. You can think, when you feel triggered, what is the story you start telling yourself? So that's something that, what is it that you tell yourself? Or to notice these negative triggers. Is there something that happens? Maybe you see something, hear something, feel something, and you notice some sort of physical response that you don't like. Sweaty palms, racing thoughts, you're pulling away, feel some pressure. So notice, does something happen there and you're just like, yeah, I do not like this situation. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go into this situation, just be aware of it. And the key here is that being aware of it, this will allow you to recognize exactly what is going on so that you can rewire this, you can reprogram, you can create a new pathway in your mind that will lead you to a subconscious success trigger. So this is why you want to self-reflect. And that's fine. Self-reflect is really good. I do self-reflection all the time. I observe my own thoughts and I think, why am I thinking like this? How can I think differently? What could I do instead? What can I feel instead? So once you know about your triggers, you can really start to think about how can you reprogram these and how can you create success triggers. So this is the idea that you can set intentional triggers. You can link intentional triggers to resourceful emotions, empowering emotions, things that are going to help you, to really simple cues. It could be something you see, something you hear, something you feel. So for example, maybe you really, really like music. And you know if you put on a certain song, that's going to instantly put you in a powerful, focused, clear thinking, confident state before you work, before you go on a sales call, before you go on a date, whatever it is. You can have different songs for different emotions. So you want to be really intentional about this. This is all about designing your ideal reality. So this is something you hear, music. Every single day, for example, I wake up and I put on certain music. It's usually different frequencies and it's different sounds. It doesn't have any lyrics. However, it's different sounds that are going, and this gets me easily into the day. It gets me into a nice state of flow where I can start working, where I can start being really confident in what I'm doing. I can create content. I can create whatever it is that I want in this state from the music that I choose. Or for example, you can set up some sort of physical anchor. So imagine that every day when you wake up in the morning and your feet hit the floor when you get out of bed, this is going to remind you to feel a certain way. Or maybe every single day that you brush your teeth, it reminds you to feel a certain way, to do something in a certain way. So you can also create physical anchors. If you go outside to go to work, maybe every time you put on your shoes and you go outside, it reminds you to do something. Or you start up your car, you hear the sound of your car, it reminds you to feel a certain way. Or you could have a certain word or phrase that you say to yourself, like, I deserve it, I have self-love, I choose success. I am abundant. Whatever it is. Maybe you have this on a card near your desk, in your office, around your house, where you can easily and effortlessly create this feeling whenever you want. So these are some ways to hear things, feel things, and see things that will create success in your mind. So to do this the most easiest way, think about something you see often that you're going to like seeing or hearing or feeling, and do it in a way that you choose what you want to feel and then feel that. So you're creating a trigger that you can use throughout the day. So think of something that you want to do. That's all you really need. You need to have in your mind what you want to see, hear, or feel, and then what you want to do after that. Because remember, we're making an association in the mind, and with repetition and that emotion, that creates a behavior or a habit. Remember, some of the triggers I mentioned earlier, just as examples, the behavior led to procrastination, or it led to someone thinking they had to be perfect. So think about the behaviors that you want that are going to help you get your goals. This is what we want to think about. So set intentional triggers. So the thing with the unconscious mind and why this works so well is the unconscious mind, it does need repetition for a habit to be installed. So the more that you see this trigger, you don't want to just see it all day, every day, a few times throughout the day. And your unconscious mind is going to get used to this. So you're teaching your mind what to trigger, what to feel, and what behavior that's going to lead to. I'm sure this is pretty interesting, isn't it? So a way to make this really easy is you create the triggers with things that you're already doing. Morning coffee equals confidence. Taking a shower equals success. When I work with people and they need help sleeping, I say your bed and pillow triggers calm, relaxation, and sleep. Only go in your bed to sleep or be with your significant other, for example. So anything that you're doing that's within your routine is a perfect example of a trigger that you can use. So, I mean, this happens to everyone. Trigger what it is that you want to trigger. Think about what it is that you want to trigger and what you want to feel. That's the thing to consider. Let's take someone, for example, who used to always, every time they had a presentation, they would get anxious, they would freeze up, they would forget what they're going to say, they blank out. So every time they had a presentation, the presentation was triggering that behavior. So what if that person, instead of thinking about the presentation, they played a certain song, or they got into a specific emotion before the presentation? The more they do that, the mind is then going to associate that trigger, that routine, that ritual that ratifies the change with being focused to speak, with being confident, with delivering a great presentation, with having the audience really like the presentation. So you can think about, even if things, let's say you have to do something at work, even if things are triggering you now, start to think about it in a different way, and think about it in a different way more and more to install that repetition and to install that new behavior. So me, for example, every time that I'm working with a client or I'm teaching people how to do hypnosis, whatever it is that I'm doing for a presentation, helping people create their ideal reality, I'm going to spend a couple minutes before. I'm never doing this in a rush. I always make sure that I have everything ready to go, that I'm not in a rush to, have my microphone out and do all these different things. because I spend a few minutes before getting in the state that I want to get into to deliver a really good presentation, a good training, or to help my client. So maybe it's the first time I'm working with someone, so I want to get into a state that's really, really curious. Or maybe I'm talking to someone about buying a training, and I want to tell them to get really decisive. So I need to be decisive myself. Or let's say I'm teaching. I want to have a certain level of calm. Also, I want to be able to appear like I know what I'm talking about. So I want to be focused and have that knowing in my mind. So think about the different common things that you're doing and notice how you want to feel and how you can start to trigger that feeling. And it can be something in your existing routine, or it can be something that you start to do now to trigger that behavior. Because when I teach these types of things to clients, if they're in sales, for example, they may have not been doing this and they were in a rush to get on the sales call and their mind was all over the place, and then they start a new routine that triggers a new emotion so that when they talk to those people, it influences the other person. Because our state, if we have a really strong state, that's going to influence the other person. Have you ever talked to someone and they were really, really nervous? You're probably like, whoa, this is, a bit too much. Or you talk to someone that was totally confident. It felt like you could totally trust them, right? So think about what are all the possibilities and opportunities that you have now to trigger success in your mind. So triggers, they're not bad. We learn them and they create a behavior. We can change that behavior with the unconscious mind. You need to self-reflect and think about what are the new triggers that you want to set up. You can create a new trigger whenever you want. It's just a matter of what you want to create. And these triggers can be the reason that you create your ideal reality, your ideal environment, the people around you, your ideal career, your ideal house. You can use these triggers to create whatever you want. Ideal team, your future, whatever it is. So think about it. What's one negative trigger that you can easily reprogram this week? And what's a new trigger that you want to create? Based off the examples I gave and all of this. Think about something you want to create that's already in your existing routine. You're already doing it. You just have to think about it in a different way. I would say keep being really curious and have a willingness to build these new triggers, because these are going to lead to new behaviors. Because really, you don't have to wait to feel a certain thing. You can trigger it. You can create it. So definitely share this with someone who will benefit, that's looking for a subconscious success trigger. Definitely appreciate everyone sharing the episodes, because more and more people are downloading them. And if you are listening on YouTube, give the video a like and definitely share it as well, and subscribe to the channel. If anyone wants to see me on YouTube, it's Create Your Ideal Future, so you can go there. Definitely appreciate all the support and share this with someone who will benefit, and I hope to see you on the next episode.